Who's an Angular developer here? Okay. Just to give you full disclosure, this is not a tutorial on Angular, so I expect some amount of Angular knowledge. I mean, I'll be happy to go through some of the basics as I play along, but what this talk is about is getting Angular and MVC to kind of play nice together, because there's some little gotchas. Who's an MVC developer? Just about everybody. Cool. So the reason I put this talk together, and I'll tell you who the actual target audience is for .NET developers, for Microsoft developers. I know it sounds kind of like an obvious thing, but it's interesting because at least in the States, when you get into Angular, there's kind of two schools of people. There's the Microsoft folks and the non-Microsoft folks. And we know there's always kind of a war going on with that. And Angular is a great, great framework. Everybody that uses it loves it. Everybody that doesn't use it wants to learn to use it. But a big part of the Angular community seems to want to drive, like I said, this is how I see things in the US, wants to drive people away from the Microsoft side. You're in Angular now, you're in the JavaScript world. This is not Microsoft. You got to use WebStorm as the editor. Use Angular only, no MVC, no nothing. Just plain HTML, the way we were supposed to work with the web. And some people get intimidated by that because they spend a lot of time working on their skill set, becoming Microsoft developers, becoming proficient with something like ASP.NET, and all of a sudden, holy shit, we got to learn everything new again, or dump what we already know, which is really the scary part, when you got to dump your existing knowledge. And I'm here to tell you that's not the case at all. These two technologies work really, really good together, and I'm going to show you, hopefully, how to properly use it, how to make them play nice together. And we're going to do it in a kind of an organic way, a series of steps, 3 or 4 different steps. So I'm going to talk a little about just general web development and how far it's come and why I am here working with these two technologies together into building something that I call a hybrid application. Call it what you want. It's just an application combining two technologies, two very, very good technologies, but at the same time kind of very different technologies. Different in the way that when you hear Angular, your mind immediately goes to client. It's all about the client. When you hear ASP.NET MVC, we deal with server processing. And both of those worlds are super important in web development. You know, it's the answer to everything is not stay at the client 100% of the time. There's a great deal of power to do at the server. But Angular can't handle that part. MVC handles that part really, really well. But MVC doesn't really handle the client side of it, except on that first delivery. So that's why putting these two worlds together, to me, it made a lot of sense. Also, one thing that I'm going to touch, not going to touch on, I'm going to elaborate extensively on, is this whole concept of SPA, single page applications. Everybody's heard that term? Who has been scared by the term single page application? I was scared shitless when I heard single page. I spent all this time learning how to do these multiple pages, and now my entire application's got to be a single page. Single page doesn't literally have to be a single page application. And I'm going to show you how to kind of ease the pain of that a little bit. Also, who's worked with Angular routing? Who really, really likes Angular routing? See, a lot of people put their hands down. It's not as bad as you think. And then you got the MVC routing table. Remember that one? We all learned the MVC routing table. 2 totally different routing engines. That's probably the most important part of this talk, is getting these 2 routing engines to play nice together and to work together. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of this. All right, remember these days? Who's over 40 years old? Not enough of you. God, you young punks. I hate this. I noticed Matt kept his hand down. Who's over 50? One person? Okay, I'm almost there. I'm 48, a couple of people. So anybody that's over 40 years old remembers these days HTML 3.2. Remember HTML 3.2? ASP, classic ASP. Who worked with classic ASP? Remember classic ASP? Remember what you had to do to post something to a form, and then the user made a mistake with validation, so you have to get back to your old one? Now you got to go query strings, and it was a mess. You see the hair loss that I've suffered? A lot of it came from classic ASP. The rest of it went with my first wife. So we had HTML, of course. We always work with HTML. And then we had JavaScript, and JavaScript is only as a scripting language. And this is the one element of this entire slide that has changed massively, because ASP.NET is still around. Web Forms is still around. It's starting to be phased out a little bit. We don't deal with that anymore. It's still a great technology, but I'm a realist, and the world is just leaning away from Web Forms now and into something new, so I'll accept that. I'm a big web control guy. That's how I got my start in the .NET community, as being kind of the go-to guy for writing web controls. I did a lot of training on how to do that. But JavaScript's the big one, because JavaScript's the one where for a long time, a lot of us not only were able to ignore it, we wanted to ignore it. It was just a scripting language. And if we can get away with just not dealing with JavaScript, we were actually in a happier place. And that's no longer the place, the place in the world. JavaScript has now become a complete first-class citizen. If you are still in the mindset of trying to ignore JavaScript, get out of that mindset or get out of the business. JavaScript is as important as C# is today, even to a Microsoft developer. And in a lot of ways, who would disagree with the statement that JavaScript is I'm going to say the statement, JavaScript can be a more powerful language than C#? Who agrees with that statement? At the same time, it's a more dangerous language than C#, because it's a dynamic language, and with a dynamic language comes a hell of a lot of power. But if you're a Spider-Man fan, with a lot of power comes what? Responsibility, exactly right. Come on, you guys are supposed to be geeks. You need to jump on that one, fast. So in the new web developer world, things have changed. Now we're in the HTML5. The big thing is that JavaScript is now a huge part of our lives. We cannot ignore it anymore. If you're still, excuse me, if you're working with ASP web forms, a lot of the web controls that web forms delivers are now very JavaScript friendly. So eating web forms can actually have a lot of rich client-centric stuff that's just delivered through web controls. MVC has changed a lot, because what we were taught to do with MVC and how we were taught to do it now is mixed and matched with a lot of these frameworks. JavaScript frameworks, Angular being one of them. Knockout was a big one. Knockout is still a big one in the Microsoft world, because it was written by somebody who actually works for Microsoft, and it's a great, great framework. I use Knockout quite a bit. So the world has pivoted a lot in web, and we have moved to the client, but it doesn't mean we have to be in the client 100% of the time. We still have a lot of work, a lot of processing that can be done on the server, and that needs to be done on the server, and that's where these two worlds work really well together. The rest of this demo, I have a couple more slides later on, but the rest of this demo is the session is very demo heavy. I have a lot to show you in the next 45 minutes, and I'm going to try to stay in the demos as much as possible. So, quick show of hands again. Who is not regularly an Angular developer? All right, not that many of you. So I got 4 main projects in this solution. And this first one, I typically skip this one depending on the number of hands that I see when I ask that question. Now, unfortunately, I saw quite a few. So I'm going to go through it really, really fast. And the people that are Angular people, just bear with me, because I don't think I'm going to show anything here that is new for you. But this is a standard Angular application. For those of you that are totally new, I added Angular to this. I added it using NuGet. Now, these first 3 demos, you saw I had 4 projects there. Those first 3 have absolutely no dependency on Microsoft whatsoever, except for the fact that I happen to be using Visual Studio as an editor. I don't fight this stuff. I embrace it. And that's an important statement, because like I said earlier, there's a huge school of thought. I don't know how it is in Europe. You guys can give me some feedback and tell me. But in the States, there's a big school of thought that once you go the Angular way, you shouldn't even be in Visual Studio, because you've left the Microsoft world. And it's actually bad if you're in Visual Studio, because it works against you. And that's absolutely not true. This has no Microsoft dependency, this entire project. But because I'm using Visual Studio, I was able to use NuGet to install Angular. It's just a tool. At the end of the day, it's just a tool. It doesn't mean I've moved to the dark side. The Force is not awakened. Did you guys go through the Star Wars craze in Europe as well? Who was disappointed? Nobody was disappointed? I'm the only guy? Has anybody not seen Episode 7? Who has not seen Episode 7? Okay, of those people, have you guys seen Episode 4? Then you saw Episode 7. You did. It was a completely recite. Do you want to know who dies? No? Somebody just yells out no. A friend of mine posted it on Facebook. He just wanted to be a dick. He did. He just posted it on Facebook completely. I thought he was joking. I'm like, haha, very funny. And sure enough, yeah, that's what happens, you know? All right, so this is the Angular. I added the Angular package here, and it adds all these other different Angular things that I'm not going to go through. The main one is this AngularJS. And this is a JavaScript file that I added to my project, okay? It creates an Angular module. You're going to see this. I'm going to go through this now because you're going to see this over and over again. It creates an Angular module. In this case, just one module is what I'm creating here. And the manifesto, if you will, of single-page applications will say your page, your application, will have one Angular module that's assigned to it at the top, and then a controller. And the controller is what defines all of the variables that are going to bind to the page. The whole concept of Angular is this thing called MVVM, Model View View Model, which means that you have properties and behavior that are sitting back in code. And I say code, not JavaScript, because in the world of WPF, any WPF developers here? Oh, come on, man. I'm a big WPF developer. Desktop rocks. I was about to say sucks. The whole concept of MVVM is that at the code, you have all these properties and behavior, so state and behavior, that gets bound to the view. The concept of MVVM is that you don't manipulate the view. So you don't use jQuery to change the DOM, and in the desktop world, you don't manipulate the view by changing the controls. You modify the view model and just let the rebinding take care of everything automatically. If you have any kind of requirement in the view, your question should be, what state do I have to change in the view model to satisfy that requirement? That's what MVVM is, and that's what I've done here. I have a controller called homepage view model, and that controller exposes some properties. All of these exposures are represented by that $scope variable. So I have one simple property called heading caption, I have one array called people, and I have one method or function called show person. Then I go out to my view, and in my view, this is a standard HTML view. It's called index.html. It doesn't get any simpler than this. In my view, I am telling it that's the application module that this application is going to use. From the body down, I am going to bind to that view model that you just saw me define. And that means from the body tag and into the visual tree, I just use the WPF term, but it applies in HTML as well. Anything that I expose with that $scope, I can bind here. So as you can see, there's people, there's heading caption. I'm looping through the people here. That's an Angular thing. Anything that starts with ng or data ng is going to be Angular. And I'm going to loop through all the people. So for each P, I'm going to do first name and last name. If you remember back in the view model, there's first name and last name. See, this is the danger of JavaScript. Dynamic objects. This is legal. Is it smart? No, it's stupid, but you can do it. And then I'm also going to have a column in that table that calls that function show person with P. And probably, I think all I was doing there was some kind of alert or something. Yeah, just an alert box. So that's JavaScript in a nutshell. And believe it or not, 90% of the stuff you're going to do in Angular, I'm sorry, that's Angular in a nutshell. 90% of the stuff you're always going to do in Angular breaks down to this simple stuff that you just see there. Just some quick binding of properties and binding the functions and doing that kind of manipulation. Very, very easy. Okay? Now, there's a lot more that can be done with Angular, and that's where the concept of routing comes in. So I'm going to jump to another demo now. Any questions on this super simple little BS demo here? I have another demo that once again has no reliance on Microsoft technology whatsoever. I call it the single shell app. Now the idea of a single shell application, a single page application, is that you have one HTML page that is delivered from the server to the client. And once that page is delivered, everything stays in the client. That's the idea behind it. The only time you go to the server is when you need to do REST calls to get some data, okay? So then the question comes, well, how do we change views? How do we flip things around? That's where the Angular routing table comes in. There's a placeholder that you can put into an HTML page where that placeholder can be filled in with other HTML templates later. So you see, it's not, this term single page application gets a little misleading there because you're not dealing with a single HTML page. You're dealing with a single HTML shell that gets delivered to the viewer, to the user, and then areas inside that shell get swapped out later on through usage of the site. Make no mistake, those areas get retrieved from the server, but they're done in small chunks, not the complete page, not the whole request. Let me give you an example of one, because then I'm going to start to show you shortcomings, and I'm going to lead to how ASP.NET MVC comes into the picture and assists you with these shortcomings. So here's another page again, index.html, and I'm going to show you the app.js this time, which is a little different. App.js has still the app main, and it still has these controllers. But now I got more than one. Notice I have an index view model. Now, by the way, let's talk about this term controller. Angular, the people at Google decided that they wanted to call these things controllers instead of view models. There's been a lot of argument as to what they should be. Some people say, well, they are controllers, and I disagree. I think most people disagree that they're more view models than controllers. Google actually agrees that they're view models because now in Angular 2 they're referring to them as view models instead of controllers. So that term has actually changed. But the keyword stays there, so you'll see that keyword all over the place. I don't truly think of it as a controller, so you'll hear me refer to it as a view model, and that's why I suffix all my names with the word view model there, because it's a class that exposes state and behavior for binding purposes to the view, and it typically has a one-to-one correspondence with either a whole view or an area of a view. To me, that's a view model. So I got one called index, one called home, one called customer list, and as you can see, the customer list one has all the stuff that you saw in that previous one that I showed you. And then I got another one called customer detail view model. So with all these view models, what am I doing here? Well, let's go from the beginning, which is the root page, index.html, just like I showed you in the previous example. Index.html now is assigning the primary view to app main as the module. That's the Angular module for the application. This is the shell. How do you know it's a shell? Well, if it's a fully qualified HTML document right there, it starts with HTML and you got your head and your body, that's your shell application. Because at the end of the day, that's what needs to be delivered to the browser for you to actually see something on the screen. You need a fully qualified HTML module. So this is my shell here. This is what brings in AngularJS. Any other additional JS files that I need. There's that app.js that I just showed you. I'm using Bootstrap because I can't design my way out of a paper bag, so I need a little bit of assistance. Who uses Bootstrap here? Everybody. Exactly. Who gets pissed off when they see, oh yeah, it's another Bootstrap site, looks like Bootstrap? Why? We've been dealing with Battleship Gray Windows applications for 30 years. Nobody's complained about that. All of a sudden, Bootstrap's around for 3 or 4 years, and people are complaining that all the sites look the same. Have you seen what a site looks like with no styling whatsoever? I'll take Bootstrap any day of the week. Because if you want me to add my own CSS styling, you do not want to use that site, believe me. So, as you can see, this application, this shell, is bound to the module as it needs to. It's also bound to a controller called index view model. That index view model is the first one that you saw here. And I'm only exposing this one variable here, heading caption. That means that I'm available, that heading caption is available anywhere here for me to bind. Is it anywhere here? Yeah, it is right there. It's in 2 places. The title bar and in an H2 tag that's down here. But I'm not using anything else. Now this is where the extra views come into play. This is where the concept of single page application starts to manifest itself, because you notice that I have one Angular directive here called ngView. This is my placeholder. This is my placeholder, and what's going to happen is Angular is going to now work with this thing called the routing table. So depending on what I browse to, now remember, you as the user are going to open up a browser and you're going to type something in the browser bar or go to your favorites bar or whatever, right, or bookmark. And you're going to browse to a page. In my particular case, I browse to something called index.html. Now, this is very important because I want you to remember what I am browsing to, what the original URL that I am browsing to is. And I just told you I'm browsing to index.html. When I browse to index.html, the order of things that take place is very important here because it's going to become even more important when we get into MVC. The order of things is that this shell application, shell page, index.html, which is physically what I asked for, is going to load. It's going to load up all this stuff. It's going to load up the JavaScript. And as soon as it loads up that app.js, it's going to run this stuff. When it runs this, it's going to define the module, which is fine because it saw that on HTML. So when it saw that, it hoped that it gets defined somewhere. So now it sees it defined. And then it sees this routing table. When it sees the routing table, by the way, and it also finds that index view model controller, and it says, okay, I can go ahead and bind that because I saw the controller tag on my shell page. But after it's done, before it delivers the page to the user, it starts using the routing table. And what it does here is very important. Now, remember I told you to remember what the original routing address is that we asked for when we typed it at the browser. Our page, localhost, whatever, /index.html. And it's important for you to remember that because you don't see that anywhere here. So now Angular says, well, I was able to give you the shell page. I was able to bind the index view model to that shell page. But I see that you got an ng view here. Now I got to figure out what the hell to put in there. So let me go through the routing table. And it says, what's the URL that you just gave me? Index.html. Let me find it in here on the when. Do I see it here? No. Do I see it here? No. Do I see it here? No. It can't find it. So hopefully it finds an otherwise, because if it doesn't, it's going to not put anything in there. If it sees the otherwise, it does what the otherwise tells it to do, which is redirect to this. So now this comes up here, and it says, okay, now that I have something to put in into that placeholder directive, let me go out and get this home.html template and bind it to the home view model controller. Now, the home view model controller was right here. So it defines its own set of properties, and it can be as short as this, or it can be as short as nothing, or as long as a couple of pages worth of stuff. And then the home.html is in my templates folder right here. So it loads up this template. It does that once. Yes, it goes to the server for it, but it just goes and gets that data chunk. And it grabs that HTML. It binds that to the view model, which means now this view is bound to the home view model, which means anything that I scope out in the view model is accessible from this view. And as you can see, I'm using the heading right there. And that can be function, state, whatever. Puts those things together, and where does it put the result of that? Right there. Now let's talk about what else it does, or what the user can do from here, because now I've exposed, look, it says go to customer detail, right? Go to customer list. Well, let's go there real quick. Let's go ahead and browse to index.html. This came from my shell, this came from my home template, and those links came from my home template. Now I go ahead and I click on customer list. Now if you look at customer list, it's just an anchor tag with an href. And if you look down there, for those of you that can see, it's not a very big room, you'll see that I'm about to browse to /customer/list. Okay? So if I click on that, what happens? I ain't going to tell you. So there's my anchor tag, customer list. So now what's going to happen is Angular is going to take over the routing. And it's important that you understand this, okay? A regular link like this, once Angular has loaded itself, a regular href anchor like this will get handled by the Angular routing table. It will not go to the server. I'm going to show you how you can override that later. But this is contrary to if Angular was not loaded. If Angular was not loaded, a link like this would go to the server and ask for the browsing to URL /customer/list. And depending on how IIS is set up, it may not find anything because there's not even a page that you're asking for. But it's important you understand, Angular is going to intercept this link and is going to put it through its routing table. And you can probably figure out what's going on by looking at the routing table, because it's going to start going from the top bottom, and it's going to find customer/list, and it says, okay, I got to load customer list HTML and bind it to customer list view model. My customer list view model is down here, and customer list HTML is in the templates folder. And there it is, very similar to my first example. And it's going to take the results of that and replace it with what it had previously, excuse me, put the home template in. Just like that. And you notice how it did that, and it looked like it didn't do a server trip. It actually did do a server trip just for the purposes of bringing in that customer list HTML. Now, Angular is smart. It will load every template once and once only, which means if I go to the customer detail view now, which is another URL, customer/detail, it's going to do that again. But if I go back to customer list by clicking this link, it already has that in memory. So it's not going to do a server trip for that again. So it's very smart like that. Now, where this routing engine becomes really powerful is in the ability to track the back button. The browser's got this thing called push state, and the push state is exposed in an API. And you can tap into this push state manually. I'm going to give you a reference into where you can learn about that at the end. But you can tap into it manually, and what push state does is give you the ability to push history onto the browser history stack. Because that history stack is what gets popped every time you press the back button. It pops one off the stack and brings you back to the previous URL. Angular takes care of all of that for you automatically. And I can prove that by pressing the back button. What was the last page that I was on? I was in customer detail, right? There's customer detail. Where was I before customer detail? I would think I was in list, right? There's list again, and now we're going all the way back home. So it tracks all of that for you automatically, which is really, really good. And all of that is handled on the client, and it's handled by Angular. Now, any questions so far? Where is this shortcoming that I'm talking about? Well, this is a single shell here. What if I need to go to this? Let's say this is a customer screen, and I got a big site, and this site consists of customer and products. And I got different designs for each of them. Well, I got two choices on how I want to design this application. I can still go single shell, which is an application-centric shell that defines the layout, the view, everything around it, all the nice, pretty banners, and maybe even a menu or something like that, and then make everything in my site sub-templates into the NG view. That includes every section of my site, the customer section, the product section, the order section, the play section, anything you want. You can certainly do that and make it a full, literally a single-page application. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that if you think that you're good enough to actually track all that stuff and manage it yourself. And if you have a team of developers that are working in different parts of the site, maybe you have a customer team and a product team, if they can interact well and play nice together, if you don't have Swedish and Norwegians, I can say that in Oslo and I get a chuckle, then that's fine. It'll work for you. But most of the time, in my experience, visually, sections of a site can be pretty different. The customer section can be red, white, and blue. The product section can be green, yellow, and orange. They can have navigation links on opposite sides of the page. It can just be a different layout. Still follow a general theme, maybe top to bottom theme. Maybe the banner across the top and the footer is the same, but everything in the middle can be a little different, sometimes different enough where you would rather manage different shells. And then you can write multiple shell applications. Now we start to have a little more work to do. As non-Microsoft developers, this is the work that we would have to do. And some people embrace this. Some people come into Angular and say, okay, I'm leaving the Microsoft world, and this is great. I'm going to use WebStorm, and I'm going to use no Microsoft stuff and just Angular, and I like pain. It's great. Why? Because I used to program C++. And you know what? Good riddance. I say use Notepad. Go for the full pain effect. Why not? So here's another application. I call this multiple shells. Well, again, no Microsoft technology being used here. Look at my references. They're 0. It just looks like a Microsoft app because I happen to be in Visual Studio, okay? And these are just folders. That's all they are. But this time, you don't see an index HTML here. You see 2 HTML files, customer index HTML and product HTML, product index HTML. And let's go to the first one, customer index. Now, this probably looks a little familiar, with the exception that I've added more information to the screen. It's got an HTML page. It's got a header and a body tag. It's a full-blown shell. And I got some binding going on here. There's some binding there. Where's this coming from? Well, it's easy to figure that out because on this page, do I have a controller somewhere? Yep, there it is. Customer index view model. And all controllers are created off of an Angular module. Where's my module? There it is right there. This one's called App Customer. So I've broken out this application into 2 primary sections because I got 2 different teams, and these teams are going to work independently of one another. So I got one team that's going to concentrate only on the customer part of this site, the other one on the product side of this site. And that's why I have a customer index and a product index. I got 2 different shells. Now, the innards of each of these shells is pretty much the same as the previous demo. If I go out to, look at the links. Customer list, customer detail. Now I'm going to go over these 2 in a second, so just pretend you didn't see them for right now. Let's go over to the script app.js, and it's not there. Instead, I got 2 of them, appcustomer.js and appproduct.js. Now this stuff is very, very similar. I have my Angular module created. This one I call app customer instead of app main. And I'm setting up my routing table, and I got all my view models here. Very similar to what you saw already. I'll describe the new stuff in just a few minutes. Very similar. Now, the reason that I decided to go with multiple shells is because I had just enough difference in the customer and product sections of my website design that I wanted different layouts. And I wanted to manage things a little easier. So in the case of my customer, I had all the navigation links on the left-hand side and all the customer information here. So if you go back to the shell, that's exactly what you see. You see all my links here. And in the right side of the screen, because I'm using Bootstrap, so I got the first 3 columns showing you this, and the 9 wide on the right showing you that ng view. So everything that I link to, customer list, customer detail, all that stuff, is going to be put into the right side of the screen. The rest of this is kind of the same. Then the product one looks a little different. Here's my row. My first part of the screen on the left has the ng view. The right side has the navigation. Now, I went very, very simple here. The difference in layout is just that the links are on one side versus the other on the 2 sections of the site. But I want to make sure you understand, the whole reason for me to design a site with these 2 different shells is that the layouts of those 2 sections is going to be pretty different. It's going to have different graphics, different stuff all over the place. Just enough where I don't want to flip, the one area that's going to flip the templates in and out, the ng view, is not enough for me to do that to everything, customer and products, because what goes around it is changing also. So in the customer section, what goes around it are the links, and in the product section, what goes around it are the links also, but they're on opposite sides of the screen, just because that's the way the requirements were set. So does everybody understand why I did that with the 2 shells? Now I need to show you a little more about navigation, because it gets to get a little more complex. If I go back to this customer index, I'm going to customer/list. I think we already established what's going to happen there, right? Angular is taking over that link. And Angular is going to route it through its routing table. And it's going to find the customer list, what did I call it? Customer list HTML, and bind it with the customer view model. Okay? I want to put a link in the customer page to take us to the product section. The product section is laid out very similar route-wise. It's got a product/list and product-detail. But if I just route to product/list, what's going to happen, the only module that is loaded in memory while my customer section is on the screen, the only module is this one here. And that's the routing table that it's going to show. Now, I can add product/list to here. But then what's going to happen? It's going to load that template with that view model and put it in the ng view that I designed for the customer section. And more importantly, the view model that is going to load has not even been added. It's not here. It's not in this JS file. By the way, I put everything in one JS file just to be simple, but typically I put my view models in separate JS files, and I would just load them up separately down here. Instead, it's easy for me to just do one. So the answer to my problem, if I want to navigate to somewhere different, is I need to go to a whole other section, which means I need to go to a whole other shell, which means I need to do a complete request from the server and basically start over again. Go to a different single-page application. And the way you do that from a link is to make sure you target the _self. This is very important. The minute that you do that, that request will now not go straight to the Angular routing table, only at the client. Putting that _self is equivalent to going back to your browser bar and typing a URL and hitting enter. And that goes all the way back to the server and starts the process over. So as you can see, where I'm going here is product index HTML. And what does that do? That loads all this up. And it loads up app-product.js at the bottom there. And app-product.js has its own routing table and its own set of view models. You see how these are two separate SPA applications, single-page applications. You can bounce between them using this _self. If you need to do navigation in code instead of through an anchor tag, I show you how to do it here. So in Angular, you have this concept, you have dependency injection. So you can inject different Angular services. If you look at, I'm using the laser pointer, but I know this is being recorded and the recording can't see the laser pointer, so I'll speak it too. But if you notice, the app customer module controller is bringing in some services there. The last two services, $location, $window, these are Angular services that allow you to do some procedural navigation, some procedural routing. The $location.path that you see commented out in the app customer module, in the customer index view model controller, that location path is the equivalent of routing to just a standard anchor with an href equals. The window.location.href is equivalent of adding the target equals self. So that's how you would do it in code. Why would you want to navigate in code? There's 100,000 reasons for doing it. You may want to run some code before you navigate away. You may want to check some validation or do whatever. So that's just a quick little add-on to show you how to navigate from code. This is how you do it declaratively from HTML. As you can see, one of my links says target equals self. The other one goes directly to the other routes. Okay, it's important that you understand how that routing took place. You got that? Now, what's a downside of all this? Well, I got two different sections here. And my whole reason for having these two shell sections, these two shell applications, is that I had layout difference between the customer and the product section. But I didn't have 100% layout difference. I did have some commonality. We are, after all, still talking about the exact same site. So this site was, bless you. This site was, NDC London sample app. So I got this banner or jumbotron across the top. I may have some some general navigation for about or contact all the way across the top. I may have some copyright information on the bottom. I had a lot of information that is shared by both of those sections. That information now has to be shared by both of these shell pages. So I have some code repeat here. Is that a bad thing? Well, it depends how much I have. In my example here, I don't really have a lot. But as sites get more complex, the design of them gets more complex, and especially if you put things in the hands of a designer, and those guys smoke a lot of weed, so they overcomplicate things. So I don't want to have to remember that, let's say my banner changes or my footnotes change. Now I got multiple places to come to remember to make those changes. And I only have 2 sections here. What if I have 5 or 6 in a site? That's pretty normal. So I'm going to go into the next example now that's going to show you how to solve this problem by bringing in the best of both worlds with Angular and ASP. Are there any questions on what we've done so far? Is anybody... I want to make sure that the whole routing, the important thing here is the order of things in the routing. And it's important that you understand that that URL that you typed, when I typed, that's one more thing I got to show you before I get out of here. That URL that I typed, customerindex.html, that URL is remembered. So when this page loads and it gets to here and it starts loading this stuff up, when Angular loads up all that HTML, when the browser loads up all that HTML, and then it loads this up, it remembers that customer index HTML. And it routes it through here, and because it didn't find it, it goes to the otherwise. Now, in this particular case, check this out. It does let me find it. Why did I put that in there? Because I didn't want to, even though I'm going to customer home up here with /customer, let me show you what happens if I comment this out. This is actually important, watch. Okay, it worked. It gave us the customer home. Why? Because it looked for customer index HTML in the routing table, didn't find it, so what did it hit? What's the word I'm looking for? Otherwise. It hit the only one guy listening, or are you guys just shy? What's going on here? If I had a room full of Americans, I couldn't get them to shut up. I got one American, he hasn't shut up. So customer index HTML was not found, it hit the otherwise, so it went over to the slash and loaded up the home. And that's what you're seeing visually. But take a look at that URL. Has that changed? URL hasn't changed. It says customer index. So let's say I'm a normal user, which means I don't have a brain to save my life, and I'm going to hit F5, which does what? Refresh, right? Let's hit the F5 key, see what happens. Okay, that changed. That actually worked. But now it changed the URL. Why did it change the URL? Not sure why it changed the URL. I don't think it was supposed to, but oh well, it did. Let's go to this other example. This one did not show you what I wanted to show you as good. Where is my single shell? Okay, this one changed the URL. It does change the URL. I'm sorry. The reason to change the URL is because if it doesn't find it in the routing table, it remembers what it is, it looks for it, it remembers what it is, it didn't find it in there, it found the otherwise instead, so it routed you to the otherwise page, and whatever the link was that it hit, that the otherwise was pointed to, that's what it changes in the browser bar. Now, when it changed it in the browser bar, what happened there? I'm no longer at index.html. I'm at just the slash. If I hit F5, what happens here? God damn it. Oh, because it's index. Bad example. I knew there was a reason that I stayed in here. I apologize. This stuff does get confusing, doesn't it? Let's go here one more time. I promise you this time it'll work the way it's supposed to. Okay. I browsed to customer index. It didn't find customer index in the routing table. It found otherwise. So it goes up to the otherwise, hits a slash, gets me to the home, and loads up that view model, puts everything together, right? It changes the URL of the browser bar to whatever the otherwise was. Since it didn't find my original URL, even though it remembered it, it now changed it to what it was able to give me. And now that's the URL that's there. Now, if I were to hit F5 now, what's going to happen, God, I hope this works. What's going to happen is that if I have a regular link here that goes to /customer, it's going to go to home because that's what my routing table is telling it to do. But that's a regular link. because Angular has intercepted it. When I hit F5, I'm going out to the browse, to the server to get a new page, right? I'm going to a complete new request. So for this, the server is going to need to find what the hell does localhost this port number /customer mean? Does it mean anything to me? It doesn't. You see where we got a little problem there? I didn't browse to an HTML page like I did before. Before I browsed to an HTML page, and even though that HTML page was not in the routing table, it was able to get me somewhere because of the otherwise. But once it got me somewhere else, that URL, the URL in the browser, changed to whatever the routing table was able to get me to. And now that becomes your URL in the browser bar, the minute I hit F5, or worse, if a user bookmarks that page and they go to it later, it's the equivalent of you typing in the browser bar /customer, which takes you nowhere because Angular is not loaded yet. So that's why I had this not commented. This is one way. Not so dirty, not so clean, but not as nice as I like it with ASP.NET. That's why I had that there, so that customer index HTML is found, and it does have a place to go. And because it was found, the effect of it being found is that it does not change the browser bar. And now that it didn't change the browser bar, hitting F5 will go to the server to get that URL. And this URL is acceptable. That's why that worked. Does that make sense? All right, now I don't want these URLs. I don't want .html. I mean, one of the beautiful things about using ASP MVC is that we got this great ability to do pretty URLs, /this, without having an extension, .html. Hell, we hated it when we had to do .aspx. Why are we now forced to do .html? So I want just some nice routes, but we can't have that without some help in IIS. You can program IIS to go to certain places depending on your routes, but now we're getting into IIS programming. I don't want to deal with that. I want to do everything as a developer in my world here. So I'm going to show you how you fix this problem and how you fix layout issues by bringing MVC into the picture. Now with MVC, things get a little more complex in a way, but in reality what they do is get a little more simple, because this concept of single-page applications becomes a little more overloaded. We can take the A in SPA and make it little a instead of big A, lowercase. The single-page application is a shell in our application, and our application consists of multiple shells. But because we're using MVC, we can actually have a parent shell now. If everybody here has programmed MVC before, you guys are familiar with layout pages. We've been using layout pages forever in MVC. There's no reason to stop using them. They were really powerful before. Who's an old web forms developer, by the way? You guys remember master pages? That worked pretty well. You know, it made you lose a little more hair, but, oi, what's going on here? Oh, shoot, hang on. That'll help. No, this is not, no, it is plugged in. Hey, this is turned on. This is plugged in, but I'm on battery. Guys, I got no power here. No, I'm serious, my laptop's gonna die. You guys can just sit there and ignore me, it's cool. Oh. Now I'm fine. That was my bad. You know what I blame it on? These stupid UK plugs. If you guys would go down to 110, you can use something a little more sensibly sized. I understand that you're trying to compensate for something here, but I mean, all right, as long as we work, all right? All right, what do I know? I'm just an American. All right, so let me go back out to the slides real quick. And hopefully you'll like the next part is my favorite. It's pretty cool. By the way, everything that I'm going to show you is completely proven. This is the way I develop applications today. This is the way I teach my clients to do it, and so far it's worked out really, really well, okay? So I've already kind of explained what the challenge is. The challenge here is that we have we're taking the concept of SPA very, very literally, and when we need to do sections of a site that are radically different, we end up having to do almost multiple SPAs. That's fine. Multiple SPAs in a large site is perfectly normal. Anybody that says that an SPA should always be just one page and that's what your whole site should be is wrong. And even the people that designed the concept of SPA were not thinking literally when they designed it. They understand that a big site has multiple shells in it because these sections will require different layouts. Not everything is based on one page. But without some help, delivering these multiple shells and eliminating the duplication of common code can become a little challenging. And that's where ASP.NET comes into the picture. With this thing that I consider, that I call a hybrid application, made up of something that I didn't coin. A friend of mine, a guy named Brian Noyes back in the States, coined this term, SPA silos, or silos of SPA. These are pockets of SPA, different single-page applications within a larger site. The difference is, in the previous example, that larger site was managed as almost two different sites, because it was two different big HTML pages, where now we are going to have dependency on Microsoft, which I would hope that nobody has a problem, because after all, we're Microsoft developers, so why are we going to shun away from using ASP MVC when we can embrace its power? So what's going to happen is that ASP MVC is going to be what goes out to the server to deliver each of our shells. It delivers them with something called a parent view. That parent view is in charge of setting up the JavaScript files that that particular SPA, that particular SPA, needs to use. Let me go to a diagram, and then I'm going to jump right to the code without worrying about these bullet points, okay? This is the top-level architecture of a hybrid application. We start with a main MVC site. That MVC site has a layout, and it has a page in it. And that page gets put into the body of the layout. This is standard MVC. I think most people have done this, right? That page that goes into the body of the layout, this is my home shell for that site section. What you guys saw earlier as customer and product. That now becomes an inner page inside the layout. And the layout becomes the place to put all the common stuff for my entire site. You see how I've taken that layout concept to one higher level by bringing MVC into the picture? So MVC uses routing to get us to the layout and the customer view, or the layout and the product view, or the layout and the orders view. I have three here. Each of these here are the root views of each site section. These root views are the actual shell page like you saw earlier with customer index or product index. Once I'm in there, the Angular module for that SPA silo, as we're calling it now, gets loaded up. The routing for that SPA silo gets loaded up, just like you saw in the previous example. And everything else now you're inside a SPA silo, and everything else going forward will use the Angular routing table to get us into all those templates and view models. Very similar to what I showed you before, but you need to understand the previous example to show you how this is going to be laid out, because the layout of it is going to be a little different. We're going to probably get out of the slides for the rest of the talk. And let's go here. And let's go into the layout page. This is a standard MVC layout page. And this is the only place you're going to see the HTML with the head and the body. You're no longer going to have multiple shell layouts because we're in one MVC page now. We're using an MVC layout page. We load up everything that we want. Anything that's common to our entire site gets loaded up here. There's my links to customer and products and orders. Excuse me. There's my common script code. There is no app customer or app order or anything here. There's a common app that's got some general stuff. But this is where it gets kind of cool, because I don't need to load up anything for the site section until I get to that site section. I certainly don't want to load up customer, product, and order view models, and I may have 15 for each section. I don't want to load them here, because what if the client goes into the customer section and just stays there the whole day? They never go into the order section. Why did I load up all that stuff unnecessarily? So I limit myself only what I need at the layout page. Now, the layout page is going to render a body, right? So I'm going to show you that body in a second. Just like in standard MVC, we have different CS/HTML pages, and depending on the route that we go to, different views are going to be loaded, right? So let's put our MVC hats on and think in terms of MVC here. Before I go into the controller, the MVC controller, I want to point you to these two script sections because they're going to be very important. If you haven't seen these before, you can have sections in a layout page, and those section definitions here don't have to load up HTML. They can load up anything you want. You're going to see what mine are in a second. I have one here called scripts, and then I have one here called JS code that's inside JavaScript section. You're going to understand why in a couple of minutes. So let's go from the top. We're now in the world of MVC, which means for a typical user, we're not dealing with HTML pages. We're not giving a user HTML routes. Everybody here, I think, almost raised their hands. You're an MVC developer. You know what routes are in the world of MVC. So if you're designing a site in conventional MVC, you're going to define a route called home. You're going to define a route called customer.something, customer/detail. Typically, that is going to go through the MVC routing table, right? And MVC is going to determine what controller and action to hit. So let's say that I'm going to go to my home site, my home page, because I'm just going to hit F5 and run this. Where's that going to go? Well, it's going to go to an MVC controller called home controller, and it's going to go to the index view, right? What if I type home/customer? Well, it's going to go to the home controller and the customer index, the customer page, customer action, based on conventional MVC routes, right? Now, what if I type customer home/product? Well, you think it's going to go there. What if I type /customer without the home? The default, who's familiar with MVC routing? Just want to get that confirmation. Okay, so based on the default route, the first part of a route is controller, the second part is the action. So if I just type /customer by itself, that would probably break because it thinks I need to look for a customer controller. But that's okay. We can enter a route in the MVC routing table that says when the route says /customer, go to the home controller customer action, which is what I did. I just don't want to show it to you yet because there's something else in there that I don't want you to see yet. So I can use the MVC routing table to allow me to get here, which is the main section, no matter what the route is. Okay? So let's say that I type /customer, and I told the MVC routing table that means go to the home controller customer action. Home controller customer action returns a view. What view is that? A view called customer that's in the home, that's in the home folder because it was the home controller. So let's go to the customer view. This is my shell page, like you saw it before when you saw customer index. As a matter of fact, a lot of this stuff is very similar, as you can see. There's the links, remember? There should be an ng view in here. There's the ng view. But now, it's not a full-blown HTML page because we've added a layout page that was delivered by MVC. So we've added a place to put common code at a site level, and now this is the place to put common code at a section level, or the SPA silo level. You understand? We're now in the customer section only. So now, all of this gets loaded. Well, how does this work? Well, remember those sections that I defined earlier? Everything that's in here has to do only with the customer section, and all of that would be rendered right at this spot of the main HTML page. Remember, MVC is building all this stuff together. So it's loading the layout page, putting that customer CS/HTML right in here in the body page, but not the whole thing, only what's down here, because this part gets placed right here, and then you got this part that gets placed right here in JS code. And what's this part doing? Well, something that you may or may not know about Angular. Remember, we started at this layout page, but look, this layout page actually has an Angular module called main. That's in here. See, I have my app.js file. Well, if I load up my app.js file, which is this one right here, there's my main. Main inherits from common. Common inherits from route. I just have the common there because now all my modules can inherit from common, and I have one place to add additional modules if I have to. But there's main. Main's got its own view model and everything, so even the layout page itself can have some binding, can have a controller. But Angular only allows you to declaratively load a module one time. Any other module after that that's loaded at the same time, that's loaded for the same site, needs to be loaded procedurally through code. Which is why, since I already have an ng app main right here, the one in the customer section has to be loaded through code. And what this line of code does, it says, load up the customer module, bootstrap the customer module, and bind it to a div tag called customer. And there's my div tag called customer. Because I already have a module loaded, I need to put this ng non-bindable around it, telling it there's already something loaded, so don't bind anything under here. But then when it gets here, it says, okay, I changed my mind, go ahead and bound to this. It's kind of stupid, but if you leave this out, you'll get a JavaScript error that will stop you in IE, not stop you in Chrome, but if you open up the Chrome console, you'll see the error displayed there, and it's just going to piss you off. So now, the page loads, all of this gets loaded into the body of the layout page, all of this gets loaded at the bottom. Notice this has its own app.js, but this one's under the customer library folder. So it loads up app.js, it loads up all of these view models. The app.js under the customer folder has the routing for the customer section, and it's got different services. It has no view models. Why doesn't it have view models? Because I'm loading all the view models separately here in different files. But I am binding to root view model, so whatever the scopes are in the root view model get placed here. Whatever the route was gets handled by the routing table, and that HTML template gets bound to a view model and put into the ng view of customer CHTML. Now, there's one more thing I have to show you, and I know it's time, but I just need 2 more minutes. I don't know if the next speaker's in here yet. Nope. Okay, there's the ng view right there. But let's talk about routing real quick. Remember, we want nice routes, but in the old way, without ASP.NET, if we route to something like /customer/list, we saw it break. Because once that route was changed, when I hit F5, what happened? It broke, because IIS didn't know what the hell to do with /customer/list. But now we have the world of MVC. And when you're going to the server for something in MVC, IIS gets intercepted by MVC. And MVC has its own routing table. So what happens if I were to type customer/list, which we know is a valid link in this customer section? There's customer/list right there. In the old days, if I were to just type that in the browser before loading up a full-blown HTML page, it would completely break because Angular is not loaded yet. But now that MVC is in the picture, I'm going to type /customer/list from the very beginning when I first open up the browser. This doesn't exist yet when I do /customer/list. But because it's an MVC application, the MVC routing table does exist. So the MVC routing table is going to see that there is a URL for customer/something. You see that wildcard that I have there? Customer/anything tells MVC, always go to the home controller customer action. So if I go straight to customer/list, it's going to route me to the home controller customer/action. The home controller customer action is going to load up the customer CSHTML view. Remember where that statement that I made at the beginning of the talk that I said was very important? It remembers the URL. So the URL is not forgotten. Customer/list has not been forgotten yet. But MVC knows that customer/list is going to get me here. When it gets me there, it's going to load up this, go through all of this process, load up the app.js for the customer, and now when it sees the fact that there's an ng view in the customer CHTML down here, it's going to say, okay, what was that original URL again? Customer/list. Let me look for it in the list here. Yep, I found it. Let me put that template and that view model in its place. So now, and it leaves the URL alone as customer/list. But now, even if I hit F5, when I hit F5, we're going back to the server to get a new page. Keep in mind, as soon as you go back to the server, you're invoking the MVC routing table. So as long as the MVC routing table has a place to go to that will not break the application, it'll load up all the Angular stuff, and then the Angular routing table will take over. Do you understand the order of the steps there? It can be a little confusing, but the effects are kind of cool, because now, watch what happens. And all this code is available to you. It'll all be on my website. I'm going to go ahead and jump right to a URL, /customer/list. This is going to go to the server. I am altering the URL in the browser and hitting enter. But when it goes to the server, the MVC routing table is going to analyze that URL, figure out that it's going to load up the home controller customer action. That's going to go to the customer CHTML view, load up the root view for that spa silo, load up the app.js for customers, remember the customer list URL, put that through the Angular routing table, end up with the rest of the page, and leave the URL in place. And there's the customer list. And if I hit F5 to go back to the server, I'm perfectly fine. You see how the two worlds are working together now and they're playing nice? We have the benefit of nice, pretty URLs that get analyzed by MVC, but the end result is still going to be loading up the Angular system and letting Angular routing take over and finish the game. It's a dance between these two technologies. One's doing its job, the other one's doing its job, and they all work well together. And unfortunately, that's where I got to stop. Everything else is exactly the same. I'll let you play with the code. I'm going to put this on my site. I have... That's my site right there. I'm headed back to the States this afternoon, so just give me through the weekend to put this online. There's a downloads link on there, and you'll see the NDC conference, and both my sessions will be there. I hope this has been beneficial, but just remember, it's not a war between these two technologies. It doesn't have to be. They can play nice together, and it's not that complicated, and when done right, the effects are actually very cool. Hope you guys enjoyed yourself. Enjoy the rest of the conference.